You are listening to the Bases Juiced podcast with John Source and Brian Goudsworth.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Bases Juiced podcast. I am Johnny Baseball, joined along with Brian Goudsworth. Here, this is it, Brian. This is our first podcast we've decided. I should say you picked Bases Juiced. Great name, by the way. This is it. We've been wanting to do this for a long time, so excited that we're finally getting to do this.
Yeah, well, we've done kind of a version of this every time we hang out because we always talk baseball, but now we're actually taking it to a podcast level, so I'm very excited.
No doubt about it, Brian. So excited that we're finally getting into this. So obviously, we're near the end of May now. Good 40-plus games into the season. Teams are starting to realize where they're at in the season. Not a lot of teams are really out of it. A few teams are. You look at Minnesota, Atlanta, looking toward the future. But most everybody else, they can say, hey, why not us in 2016?
And that includes teams like the Phillies,
Right.
who thought that was going to be the case before the year started.
24-19, they have the Braves this weekend.
They've actually lost the first two of that series.
Right. But yeah, they, I tell you, young players, man, it's... They knew they had to do a rebuild, but it's accelerating the process a lot quicker than I thought. A lot of guys there. Vince Velasquez has been excellent, but a lot to like in that NL East with the Phillies. As we mentioned, the Nationals are going to be in the mix. But let's talk about the Mets first, Brian. A big win yesterday to get the walk-off. David Wright, captain, gets it done. It's been a struggle for him of late. So what was it like for you, Brian, to see David come through there in that big moment?
Well, he really needed that, and I tweeted after they intentionally walked Curtis Granderson, and I know that Wright's coming to the plate, and I said to myself, nobody needs this more than David Wright right now. He's been going in a really bad way. We know about the health concerns. He has to have a certain amount of days off because of the back. He was scratched from the lineup in a game earlier this week against the Nationals because the back flared up, so that's going to be an ongoing concern all season. His performance has been slipping. He's been striking at a very high clip, too high for David Wright standards, and so he needed that kind of an at-bat. He gets ahead in the count 3-0. I'm just thinking he's going to walk, and quite frankly, walk-off walks are kind of boring, so walk-off hits I think are more exciting, and he gets the green light on a 3-0 pitch, drives it into right center. Eric Campbell, who started the inning with a single through the right side, comes in to score, and the Mets get a come-from-behind win on a day where DeGrom wasn't at his sharpest and hasn't really been at his sharpest all season. And the Mets get a good win, back-to-back wins now this weekend against Milwaukee after a very tough series against the Nationals, so they'll try for the sweep today.
Talked about DeGrom, 5 innings, 5 hits, 4 earned runs. Struck out 7, walked 3 guys, not, what you're accustomed to seeing from him. But Robles, 2 innings, a walk, 3 strikeouts. Addison Reed got it done in the 8th inning there, struck out 2, got around a hit and a walk. And Familia picks up the win by, going in the 9th there inning. And, bases loaded. David had a 3-0 count. And, I'm thinking, does he swing away here? Is it kind of a pitch that was down? But
it may have been ball 4.
It might have been, yeah. It was definitely close. But I remember talking to Steve Gelbs after the game. I was watching it, and David said, this is my best chance to get a fastball. So he got a fastball, and he went the other way with it, which is what you're accustomed to seeing. David Wright in his prime doubles the other way to right center field. So it was good to see again that from him.
No question. And you brought up some of the pitching numbers there. And one of the pleasant surprises with this Met team, the bullpen itself as a whole. Like Robles has been good. Familia was a little shaky early on, but he's been very good. Addison Reed has kind of developed into the 8th inning guy for this team. And as a whole, the names aren't maybe what some other teams have, like, of course, the Yankees and some others. But right now, this bullpen is getting the job done. When they get handed the lead, very few times have they blown it, and they've done a nice job this year.
We know how important bullpens can be, having leads late in the game. And
you being a Royals fan, especially.
We'll get into that a little bit later on. But, yeah, obviously it's exciting to see the Mets playing well right now. We know Milwaukee's kind of, in a rebuilding phase, but Cespedes hit the 2-run homer in the 6th inning there, and it's something that this team has really built themselves on. You mentioned the pitching starting, and the bullpen's really developing here as well. This team likes to hit home runs. We know Sandy Olson likes power pitching, power offense. And it's something that got them into the postseason a season ago. They rode it to the World Series where they kind of dried up a little bit offensively, but they score a lot of their runs with the home run, Brian. Now, do you think this will work, over the course of a long season? Because I don't know that it will.
Well, I mean, it's showing that there's going to be peaks and valleys as you go through the season. Early on, they were playing a lot of the bad teams in the division, whether it was the Braves, the Phillies, who we thought were going to be bad, turned out not to be thus far. But as you said, they were hot with the home run ball. Neil Walker's hitting them out left and right. He's kind of cooled off in that department. Cespedes is among the National League leaders. And everyone in this lineup, 1 through 8, can hit the ball out of the ballpark. But as we've seen, on their last road trip, they go out to pitchers' parks like LA and San Diego, didn't really hit a lot of home runs. Even in the 3-game series at Coors Field, didn't hit a lot of home runs. So when you're built like that, it's very much a feast or famine lineup, which is what this Met lineup is. And it is frustrating to watch as a fan because at times they're going to score bundles of runs by hitting 4 home runs in a game, but then they're going to go through stretches where they face good pitching and don't hit as many home runs and consequently aren't going to score as many runs, which we've seen the last couple of weeks. But that's just the way they're built. As you said, that's Sandy Alderson's vision for this team, and so he's not going to deviate from that, so we're just going to have to live with what the Mets bring.
Now, it's something that I've talked about this, just talking in general. Looking at this lineup, it's something that, I don't know that, first of all, you can't rely on the home run for a 162-game season and into the postseason, as I think we all expect the Mets to be there come October this year. But the thing with me, and like I said, you know this, but they hit the ball out of the ballpark, they have a good pitching staff, but they don't do a whole lot else. They don't play small ball. I was watching the game in the 9th inning yesterday. 2 guys, it was Campbell and Plawecki, right? They just could not get a bunt down, and then Plawecki did with 2 strikes.
Reynolds,
rather. You're right. Right. It wasn't Campbell. Campbell let off
Campbell single.
Right.
Plawecki walked. Then the sac bunt. Right.
But I'm like, this team cannot bunt because they just don't. I mean, I know. Granted, when was the last time Kevin Plawecki had to drop down a bunt?
Right.
If you're in the major leagues, you gotta get a bunt down. They cannot get a bunt down. It's just like even their pitchers hit home runs. It's just like it's.
Right.
They don't play small ball, and if they're not hitting home runs, they don't steal bases. They don't have a lot of speed on this team. They haven't since really Jose Reyes was there, and if they can't hit the ball out of the ballpark, they're not going to score runs. And over a long season, like last year in the postseason, it worked until they faced a team like Kansas City in the World Series, and if they faced a team like San Francisco or St. Louis in the postseason, which St. Louis is struggling right now. But if they face a team like that, Pittsburgh even, I don't like their chances because they're just too feast or famine, like you said. And in the short postseason series, power offense seems to dry up. And if you can't find other ways to score runs, it's not going to be a very long series.
Yeah, well, they're not going to be a team that manufactures runs. I mean, you'd like them to have a little bit more speed than they do. It's fine to be a home run hitting ball club, but you don't have a lot of speed. Shows why they don't manufacture runs, because they don't, get guys on. They're not walking as much as they did last year. They're not a team that's going to hit and run, steal bases, score runs that way. It's just not the way they're built, but on days where they hit home runs, there's going to be some wins, no doubt.
Regardless of, right now things are going well for the Mets, for the most part I should say, because we talked about the pitching. Matt Harvey, though, Brian, I tell you what, I don't know what's going on with this guy right now, but, he's just not the same guy that he has been his whole career. This is a guy who wants the ball, number 1 starter, just goes out there, just dominates, just has that kind of that, attitude, mentality on the mound, like I'm better than you, I'm going to get you out, and just that fire, passion, which is not there right now. He's getting hit around a lot, and his velocity is down, and he's just really not the same guy. And you talk about this great pitching staff. You got Syndergaard, who is right now their best pitcher, I think. DeGrom's finding ways to be successful without having his best stuff right now. Matt Harvey is not doing that right now.
Well, no. Right now, he's got an ERA around 6. Anytime you're throwing around the possibility of taking him out of the rotation or sending him to AAA, which is really not the answer at this point, or putting him in the bullpen, whatever, has been tossed around at this point. I don't know what you do with him right now. I mean, it sounds like he's going to make his next start. The Mets are playing the Nationals again, which ironically enough are the team that knocked him out in the third inning of his last start, the worst of his career, where he gives up 9 runs, 6 earned to inflate that ERA close to 6. But he's lost his confidence right now. He doesn't look anything like the guy we saw in the World Series who had that great game in Game 5 against the Royals and, as we know, didn't come out or came out for the 9th inning and, couldn't finish the deal, and the Mets go on to lose that game. But I was honestly a little bit surprised that Terry Collins, said we may pitch him on Monday. Now, it sounds like he's going to go on his regular rest day Tuesday, but I would be inclined to just give him this start off, give him a week or so to clear his head, and maybe then the next time he takes the mound we see a little bit better results. But I think to keep running him out there, it's not good for his confidence, and I just don't know if it's going to get better doing that. I'm not ready to send him to the minors or put him in the bullpen. My answer right now would be let him miss his start, let him clear his head a little bit, give him some time off, and then maybe he can work his way back toward being the Matt Harvey that we've come to watch dominate the last couple of years, pre-Tommy John surgery.
Right. Well, his next story, like you said, is going to be against the Nationals in Washington, his next scheduled start. And like you said, against the team that really got to him his last time out. Harvey on the season right now, 3-6 with a 5.77 ERA, 9 starts, 48 in the third innings, 43 strikeouts. You brought up Game 5 of the World Series. That was his game. He was dominating that game, and like the competitor that he is, he doesn't want to come out of this game.
Right.
He goes up to Terry Collins and says, look, you're not taking me out of this game. You can't blame him. Did Terry in hindsight, Terry should have brought his closer in with the clean inning. It didn't happen that way. And Harvey went out, walked Lorenzo Cain after getting, to a 2-strike count. Hosmer doubles him in after he steals second. And I don't know if, I have no idea what's the problem is, but if it is a mental thing, I just kind of had a feeling that maybe the Royals got to him, and maybe it was his game, and he just did not. He was just kind of stunned, and maybe he's still kind of dealing with that.
Well, I think too there's another factor that could be at play here. I read a statistic that he threw the most innings the year following Tommy John surgery. Counting the postseason, I think it was 230 innings that he worked regular season and post. And you could argue that that's had a big impact on him. When you come off that kind of surgery, you're not accustomed to going out there and having that kind of a workload, that kind of strain on your arm. And so he may be feeling the after effects from that. I think that's definitely a possibility as well.
And that certainly could be true. And that takes us back to the innings limit that everyone talked about. You're done after 180 innings. That's what his agent, Scott Boras, came out and said. And then Harvey's like, okay, well, I'm going to listen to my agent. Then everyone's like, "Oh, are you going to quit on the team?"
Right. Everyone freaked out about that, and he may have known that he really couldn't handle that.
And now this may be what happens because of it. So this is his career. He knows what he can and can't do. And like you said, after Tommy, he missed a year and a half because he missed a full 2014 season on top of missing the end of 2013. Right. But still, that's a lot to come back from. I still kind of feel like the Mets shouldn't have thrown him right away. Should have maybe delayed his season until beginning of May. That way they have him for the postseason. Obviously every situation's different, but you look at it and it's that's like you said, that is a lot of innings. Like you said, the most ever the first year off of Tommy John surgery. And he wasn't thinking about that at all. But now, into the new season, velocity's down, control's not, what it usually is, and perhaps time off, like you suggested, maybe skip a start. Give him a week to rest, maybe that'll help. Who really knows, but...
Sounds like they're inclined to pitching him the National Series, so we'll see how he does.
We'll see, but that's a very interesting thought that you brought up about the Tommy John surgery, because that's very true. Mm-hmm. Generally speaking, guys don't throw 230 innings their first season back, but when you go to the World Series, you kind of go where your team needs you.
And he pitched great in the postseason, including that Game 5, which was his, obviously the best outing of all of them.
Like I said, Game 5, that was his game, and then just didn't. end the way they hoped. But 8 innings, he was dominant, and you don't look at that game and say, okay, next year he's going to show signs of fatigue because he was dominant. So
Right.
he already had Tommy John, and we talk about this Mets pitching staff. 4 of the 5 guys have already had Tommy John surgery. Harvey, Zach Wheeler's are coming back from it right now, and DeGrom and Steven Matz had it when they were in the minors. Syndergaard's the only guy who hasn't had it yet. So,
And right now, he's the hardest thrower in all of baseball with an
Right.
average fastball velocity of 99 miles an hour. I mean, the guy right now is pitching like a stud, and that's who the Mets have on the mound this afternoon trying for the sweep.
So let's switch gears. You mentioned Kansas City earlier on. They're 22-20. They've took the first 2 games from the team that's in first place right now, and they have another game today. Yordano Ventura is going up against Carlos Rodon. They were in a cold stretch going into Yankee Stadium when they lost 3 out of 4. After that series, though, they had a home stretch. They won 4 out of 6, and now they take the first 2 in Chicago. They've won 5 of their last 6 games. The White Sox have been struggling of late, so they gained 4.5 games on them so far this week alone. So get Mike Moustakas back off the DL. They're not the same dynamic team that we saw a season ago. At least it doesn't look that way. Because, I mean, in the postseason last year, just base hit after base hit, first to third. Kind of the opposite of what the Mets did. I mean, really, 2 teams in that World Series last year. The Mets, the Royals don't hit the ball at the ballpark like the Mets do, but they play small ball better than anybody. At least the last few years they have. And they're showing signs of getting back to that a little bit. Starting pitching, you have Chris Mellon and Chris Young on the disabled list right now. Danny Duffy and Dylan G have stepped in nicely in the past couple of games here. The bullpen, Wade Davis has 1 blown save this year against Atlanta. Joaquin Soria hasn't been great. Kelvin Herrera's been lights out. Like we said, it's still early, but what do you think, Brian?
Well, the last 2 days of their starting pitching that they've gotten from Danny Duffy and Dylan G, who filled in for the 2 guys that you said are on the DL, and Young and Medlin, and they've done very well. As you said, the 2 wins against the White Sox. A couple of things why I think the Royals have struggled here. As you said, I mean, they've picked it up a little bit the last week or 2, but Kendrys Morales last year was an enormous run producer for this team. He drove in over 100 runs. He hit for a good average, like 285. And the guy's hitting under 200 right now. I mean, he made a big difference last year for them producing runs. He's struggling right now. Alex Gordon's hitting about 215. You're not accustomed to seeing that the last few years from him. Lorenzo Cain got off to a terrible start. He's picked it back up. So, he's back where you want him to be. But, some of their guys, just their performance was down to what it was last year. I mean, Kane was an MVP caliber player last year. When he gets off to a bad start, it was a little alarming. Now he's been good the last couple weeks, has the average up close to 270. The bullpen, I feel like, has lost some of its depth from last year with Ryan Madsen now in Oakland and a couple of the others like Joe Blanton, who's had a good year with the Dodgers. But, I think the Royals are still a good baseball team. I think they're not quite what they were last year, but still good enough to at least win this American League Central and take their chances again in October.
Ryan Madsen and Joe Blanton. Talk about two big signings by Dayton Moore that were under the radar moves a season ago.
Right.
Can't argue with those points right there. Lorenzo Cain's hitting 271. Alex Gordon is hitting 209. Morales 191. Not what you expect from these guys. Moustakas has 7 home runs, 13 RBIs. He's hitting 248.
And that's with a stint on the DL.
Right, with the stint, and he's still second on the team in home runs. Eric Hosmer's hitting 312, 8 home runs, and has 21 RBIs. But after him, your next everyday player is Cain, hitting 271. He has 6 home runs, 22 RBIs. Alcides Escobar 267. He's kind of been up and down, but most of your other everyday guys are 250 or below. I mean, Gerard Dyson 250. If you want to say him, I mean, he's kind of splitting time with Paulo Rolando's at 368. So last year they had a lot of these guys hitting better than 250. All these guys are around 300 or so. And you talked about Gordon and Morales are 2 big key players there who have not been what you thought they were going to be, and especially with Gordon, who they gave a nice 4-year, $72 million contract here this offseason as a free agent, biggest contract they've ever handed out. Off to a slow start with him, like he's talked about the bullpen. Even you had Greg Holland for half the season last year.
Right, it's amazing to think that Wade Davis used to be the setup guy.
Yeah, which for a lot of the time people thought he was the better of the two pitchers, but
they were both. I mean, when Holland was on his game, he was a dominant closer.
yes, there's no doubt. The bullpen is still a strength, but it's not as dominant, and that gets magnified when the rotation goes through a rough stretch like they were, going over the past 2 or 3 weeks. Chris Medlin, 1-3 on the DL right now, but 1-3 with the ERA of over 7.5. Chris Young's 1-5 ERA over 6.5. Your Donald Ventura's got to a good start, but now he's 4-2 with the ERA of 4.85. He goes today. Edison Volk has 4-4, 3.79. Ian Kennedy's been your best pitcher, 4-3 with the 3.24 ERA. So they gave Kennedy 5 years and $70 million to stabilize the rotation, but if he's doing well, that's great. But if the rest of these guys are really struggling like they have been, it's not going to get you very far. And while, yes, they're built on their bullpen, you got to have these guys go 5-6 innings, not 3-4 innings like a couple of these guys have. With Duffy, you're getting him built back up. And G, you've seen plenty of G with the Mets, so you can know what he can do as a starter. But offensively, they haven't been scoring as many runs, and that puts more pressure on the pitching staff, which hasn't really held up its end of the bargain for the majority of the season so far.
Yeah, so we'll see. The Royals, like the Mets, going for a sweep today, as you said, with Ventura on the mound against Rodon after their series win over the Red Sox. That was a good win for them. They split the doubleheader and won the first game of the series. So Royals playing better. We did the Mets. Let's kind of recap some of the action from yesterday's games, and then we'll kind of preview what's to come here. So we covered 2 of the games from yesterday. The Twins get a rare win yesterday as they beat the Blue Jays 5-3, second straight loss for J.A. Happ. There aren't going to be many wins for the Twins this year. I don't think I thought this team was going to be as bad as they've been, but a lot has gone wrong for that team, and it's been abysmal.
Well, not to get into it too much, but last year I think we were all waiting for the Twins to kind of fall off, and it just didn't happen until the last 2 weeks of the season. They still were around 500, but a lot of the guys came up and did really well for them, and I'm thinking, okay, they're going to take the next step. It just hasn't happened, and they've been bad, quite frankly. And I like Jose Barrios. He came up, didn't last very long, got sent back down to Rochester AAA. Pitching hasn't been great. They just haven't been very good this year, and I kind of applaud them for not rushing the process like some teams might have done a season ago, because they have a plan and they didn't rush. They didn't trade guys for major league pieces last season to try to make a push for the playoffs, because I think that generally gets you in trouble more often than not. The Twins still have the players, like Byron Buxton's going to be a good player, but guys like Carlos Correa come up and dominate right away. Francisco Lindor as well. They think he's going to be this guy. Buxton, he's more raw as a baseball player. He needs a couple of years to develop, and he really didn't get a lot of time in AAA, so I don't think, now he's not ready. So you send him back down because they had him up last year. So with the Twins, I think patience is needed. Last year, it was fun to watch, but they're not ready yet to compete.
Yeah, and Byron Buxton finds himself back in AAA. Sano was a guy who came up last year, hit a bunch of home runs. He's not had the same kind of production this year. Their pitching has been atrocious. Their bullpen has not been good. So Twins do win yesterday. Also, Braves have won back-to-back for probably the first time all year as they beat the Phillies 2-0 behind Williams Perez. So the Braves get a victory there. Cardinals, who haven't quite been the Cardinals, 3 games over 500. They win yesterday behind Mike Leake 6-2. Best outing for Leake in a Cardinals uniform. He worked 7 scoreless. St. Louis, though, has had kind of a weird year. They've gotten production from guys like Aledmys Diaz out of nowhere, and Jeremy Hazelbaker early in the season was hitting a bunch of home runs, but some of the guys that you expect, like Grichuk and Colton Wong and Matt Adams, have not really done the job for the Cardinals. Piscotty's had a great year, hitting about .325, but it's been kind of a strange year for the Cardinals so far.
And they're 23-20, which is not bad by any means, but when you have the Cubs and the Pirates It's not looking. And plus, I mean, we're used to the Cardinals being much better than 3 games over 500. You mentioned Mike Leake, his best start with the Cardinals, 3-3 with a 4.07 ERA, and he kind of fits what they do though
Right.
with their pitching. But you thought he's going to thrive there, and he's kind of been inconsistent, and you figured he was going to be better than he has been so far. But that's a good sign for Mike Leake there. You mentioned Diaz and Hazelbaker. I mean, they just keep finding these guys from
That's the
wherever.
Cardinals.
It's just the Cardinals' way, but the rest of these guys got to pick it up and get it going. I think Adam Wainwright.
He's struggled big time.
He means so much to this team, and I think even though he's struggling, but what he means to the younger pitchers too, kind of like Chris Carpenter was when he was a younger guy, but he's a big key to that team. Hopefully, he can get it turned around for them.
And then also yesterday, I mean, it seems like every time you look at a Red Sox score, they have like 9 or 10 runs. I mean, that lineup right now is unbelievable. They wallop the Indians 9-1. Joe Kelly comes off the DL and throws a gem. Indians only had 2 hits. Kelly's now 2-0. Bauer, who had been pitching well for the Indians, now back in the rotation with the injury to Carlos Carrasco. He takes the loss. But this Boston team right now, we know they don't have great starting pitching. They don't. But this lineup with all those young players, and I've heard them now called their version of the Killer Bees with Bogarts and Betts and Bradley now with a 26-game hitting streak. This team, top to bottom, I mean, their lineup is scary how good it is right now.
Talked about patience with young players, and Boston, even though they're a big market team, they've had this good farm system and still do for a couple of years now. You mentioned Bogarts. It took him, a couple of years. Last year he had a big year. Struggled kind of early on. Jackie Bradley's always been great defensively,
Right.
and now his bat is just on fire right now. And Mookie Betts, same thing. It's just dynamic players. And Mookie Betts was a second baseman coming up in the minor leagues, but they got Pedroia, so they moved him to center field, now over to right field. So he's kind of moved over, but he's adapted. And they're another team. They have a lot of power offensively, but they have a complete lineup. But even David Price hasn't been pitching that great.
No, he's got an ERA around 6.
Yeah, so that does worry me moving forward. They're 26-17, right up there with the Orioles in that division. But right now they're going well. But we'll see how far the pitching can take them as it advances into the season.
Yeah, and Betts hits 2 home runs yesterday, including a grand slam. I mean, great contributions so far this year from guys like Travis Shaw, Ortiz in his farewell season. I mean, he looks like he could play another few years. The guy's still playing at a high level, and the Red Sox offense is really clicking. Big win yesterday, 9-1 for them. Rockies over the Pirates, 5-1. Not really anything exciting there. The Yankees all of a sudden have won 4 games in a row for the first time. They've won 3 in a row here in Oakland after winning the last game in Arizona. And all of a sudden, the starting pitching, which for the most part has been awful this year, but Tanaka, who's been their best pitcher, gets the win yesterday. He's 2-0. But this last turn through the rotation, Evaldi's been good. Sabathia, I don't know what he's been eating, the last couple starts, but he's all of a sudden turned it around. And the Yankees playing their best baseball the last few games here.
Well, I mean, it's been a long start to the season for them. But like I said, I think starting pitching is going to carry most teams. And with Boston, it hasn't been there yet. It can be, but with the Yankees, I'm not saying they're going to go on this big run now, but they're winning games because they're pitching well. And Tanaka had it a lot yesterday for his start. They're now 20-22. They've built this bullpen, which really hasn't. I mean, obviously Chapman had a suspension for the first month of the season, but Betances and Miller, plenty good enough on their own. Now you got Chapman back. I mean, just good luck. But if you don't have a lead, what good is it? And they haven't had many leads for most of the season. But if they can get it going, if they have a lead after 6 innings, the game is over. But hasn't been there yet so far. But we'll see with them how it's going to go, because if they're starting pitching and just give them a few innings and hold the lead, get it to those guys, I mean, just, the game is over. So
Yeah, and that formula has worked for them a couple of times during this win streak, where the starter goes 5 or 6 and then you hand it off to the big 3 and good night the lights. So the Yankees playing well. They win yesterday 5-1. Felix Hernandez shut down the Reds yesterday. Mariners blanked the Reds 4-0. Tigers get a win over the Rays 5-4. Big story there, though, the injury to Kevin Kiermaier for Tampa, their center fielder, who's probably the best defensive center fielder in the game, a guy who's hit well the last week when the Rays have suddenly had this outburst of run scoring starting in Toronto. And to lose him now to a fractured left hand for the next couple of months, this is a guy who plays all out. He's such a big part of their team, and I really think the heart and soul for this team, that's a very tough blow for that club.
Oh, it's so fun to watch playing center field, and watching that play last night. I mean, every time you dive for a ball in the outfield or just anywhere, and you get your hand under your body, and you just wonder, is his hand or is his wrist okay? And in this case, ends up fracturing his hand, and that's just, like you said, terrible, terrible news for this team. He means so much to them. He's an electrifying player. Defensively, yes, but even offensively, he can steal bases. He can hit the ball in the gaps. He's a fun guy to watch, and like you said, he's kind of really taken what this team, their identity, what they're about, athleticism, and defense, which we know they've been for quite some time, obviously with great pitching as well.
Now, the next game we get to is probably the biggest series of the weekend, the Cubs and the Giants. The teams have split the first two. Giants take it yesterday with Kane on the mound. They win 5-3. Arrieta went to 8-0 on Friday with the 8-1 victory. Chris Bryant hit homers in back-to-back games. The Cubs, though, did lose Jason Hayward. I don't believe that injury is serious. It looked really scary when it happened. Don't know if you saw it. On a diving catch deep in right field, right at the wall, he suffered, I think it was a groin injury, but I think he's only going to be out 3 to 5 days, so a sigh of relief there. Even though he hasn't produced well for them offensively, still a great defensive player and a big part of their team.
Well, I think that's what got him his big money, his glove, his value defensively, and he has upside. He's still 26 years old, so he has upside with the bat. But the thing with this Cubs team is obviously you don't want to see a big injury to anybody. We saw it with Schwarber earlier on in the season, but they have so much depth that they could just plug in someone. They should be fine. Obviously, you hope the best for Hayward because, like you said, him in right field just covers so much ground out there. Great arm out there in right field. So offensively, they have plenty of bats that are going to, carry the load offensively.
Rangers beat the Astros 2-1. Both of the games this weekend in that series have been 2-1 scores in favor of Texas. Tolleson, their closer, lost the job, so Sam Dyson now closing games. He's saved the last two. But if you look at the most disappointing teams in baseball right now, I think you have to start with this Houston Astro team. A team that burst onto the scene last year when nobody expected it. We saw Carlos Correa. We saw some of the other guys like George Springer come into their own and make the playoffs, even though they did kind of fade late, and they won the one-game playoff against the Yankees before losing to your Royals. And so far, they just have not gotten it going. 10 games under 500. Keuchel was a Cy Young Award winner last year. This year his ERA is in the fives. Outside of Jose Altuve, who's hitting about .335, they're just not getting good performances across the board, and it's been a tough start for them.
Well, this is a team that a lot of people liked, including myself. This year, I picked them to win the World Series. Like you said last year, a great ALDS with the Astros. Game 4, I still don't know what happened that game. It was just unbelievable, that comeback. Correa makes the error in Game 4, but this is why I love this kid so much, because he handled it. He was 20 years old at the time, and he just handles it like he's been playing in the major leagues for 10 years. It's just, the kid is special. But like I did mention this with the Twins, some teams jump the gun and making moves when they shouldn't do so. I think this is example A right here, because they traded away so many players for Carlos Gomez and Mike Fiers at the deadline last year, and for Ken Giles this year, which if Ken Giles is your closer, okay, fine.
It's not even the closer.
He's not the closer.
And he's struggling.
And he's been struggling in that role because he's probably thinking, okay, they traded 5 guys for me.
Pressure's on.
I'm going to be the closer, or I got to contribute, because this is a team, a young team that wants to get into the postseason and advance past the division series. 17-27 at the bottom of that division right now, and obviously a lot can change. We know how good this team can be. But I mean, look at the guys that they traded away. I mean, I know the guys up in Milwaukee haven't really come about yet, but Josh Hader's in Double A pitching excellent. Domingo Santana, he's on DL now with the Brewers, but I mean they just traded so many guys. Who Carlos Gomez is, he's not the guy he was with Milwaukee, right?
Yeah. Hitting under 200
right.
And now on the DL, so he's not helping them at all.
I mean, he's electrifying. He's a lot of fun to watch, but he takes big swings, and if he doesn't hit the ball, which he hasn't been a lot lately, and he's been injury prone in his career, so I think they gave up too much there, and then the Phillies, Ken Giles, I mean, get Velasquez, which they didn't think he'd be this good, Houston. I don't think the Phillies did either, but my goodness, I think their Phillies are loving it now, and Mark Appel, I mean, it goes on and on, with both of these guys. They traded 9 players, and they still have a very good system. Alex Bregman's coming up.
Playing
soon.
third base now in the minors.
In Double A, yeah. So you'll probably see him soon. They have, Brett Phillips, another guy they traded away to Milwaukee, who I'm a big fan of in that Gomez deal. So they traded away a lot to win last year, which, it didn't work. I don't think they had to do that because they have a big window. I want to keep that window open as much as I can rather than make a couple big moves for a center fielder who's injury prone, a back end starter and fires, and a guy who throws one inning. And Giles, who really wasn't proven much until last season. But they still have a good system. They still have a big window, but I think it could be a lot better if they didn't. Jeff Luhnow's a great GM, but they kind of, I think, panicked and made some moves when they didn't really need to do that.
Right. So it's always a tough position, when you outdo expectations, what you then do at the trade deadline. And the team that might be in that position this year is the Phillies, and we'll see if they're going to be buyers at the deadline, which I don't know that I would advise at this point.
I would not.
Yeah.
I would not trade your guys you have to win now, because Nationals and the Mets aren't going anywhere. You got to keep your guys and contend and be open for as long as you can.
And here's another series from the National League East. Marlins over the Nationals last night, 3-2. Big development for the Marlins is Jose Fernandez is pitching like Jose Fernandez the last few starts. He's got the ERA down to about 3, 6-2 now on the season. A lot of people just kind of wrote off this team after the D. Gordon suspension. But, Derek Dietrich has filled in at second base and done very well. A bunch of their guys have been productive, including Yelich and Ozuna recently. Prado's hitting about 370. If they can ever get Giancarlo Stanton out of this massive slump where he's hitting about 210, striking out all the time, this team is actually somewhat dangerous.
Well, and I'm not going to deny what I said last year. It ends up being not true, obviously, but I picked this team to win the World Series at the beginning of the season last year.
And everything went wrong.
Everything went wrong. Everything went wrong for this team. Nothing went right except for D. Gordon, like you said, which now obviously is a different story. But you get Fernandez back, and even like you said, Stanton's not even hitting well. But Yelich, Ozuna, there's too much talent on this team for them to not be a solid team.
Agreed.
Even though the pitching wasn't, Henderson Alvarez 2 years ago was 5th in the NL in the ERA. Now he's with the A's and was hurt. They're bringing Wei Chen to be the left-hander there in that rotation, but the rotation's been solid. Cishek is not there anymore, but he was good. Now he's with Seattle, where he looks like he's bouncing back. AJ Ramos at the back end of the bullpen now is getting it done. Even Carter Capps is hurt, but they're finding ways to win games. And 22-20, it's better than I think a lot of people thought, but again, I think this team is as talented as the Nationals are when everything's going right. I really like this team, and I had them winning the World Series last year, so that didn't work out, but I still think could be some good things for this team in the future.
It was never about a lack of talent with this team. They had plenty of it. It was about putting it together, and they're starting to do that. They're not all the way there yet, but 2 games over 500. I think they're going to be in the mix for maybe the entire season for possibly a playoff appearance, so we'll see with the Marlins. Orioles over the Angels last night, 3-1. Wasn't an explosion from the Orioles like they've been a lot this season. That team, talk about a team that can hit the the baseball with power. I mean, Machado and Adam Jones and Chris Davis and Trumbo's been a great addition. Scope at second base. Wieters hit a big 3-run homer yesterday in the 9th inning. That team is loaded with power, and they're playing terrific. 11 games over 500. It's a team that doesn't have very good starting pitching, although they've gotten a bounce-back year out of Tillman. Gosman's come up and done a good job, but they have a good late-game bullpen led by the closer, Britton, and they're hitting the cover off the ball in the early going here.
Oh, another team like we talked about, they rely on power, but it's going well for them right now. And looking at what they have going on here, it's one guy I've been saying it seems like the past 3 or 4 years. If Kevin Gausman can take that step to become that top of the rotation starter, it's going to help this team so much. And Chris Tillman 2 years ago when they won the division
had a very good year.
Was very good. Had a down year last year and is bouncing back this year. So those two guys at the top stabilize this rotation with that offense, which, yes, they rely on home runs, but they can hit the ball. They can hit the gaps too. They can run. They're an athletic team. They play good defense. You talk about Mark Trumbo. My goodness, what a find he's been. You talk about, the bullpen, Britton, 12 saves. O'Day, getting it done. And Brad Brock, 4-0, picked up the win last night. Guy doesn't get talked about a lot, but just generally speaking, this team right now, we're up there with Boston, and a lot of people didn't know what to make of this team because it was kind of similar to what they had last year. They bring in Dexter Fowler, then they don't bring in Dexter Fowler. He goes back to the Cubs, and they bring in Gallardo, then they don't get Gallardo, then they end up getting Gallardo. Right now, offensively, this is what this team relies on. Manny Machado looks like an MVP candidate this year. So a lot's going well for this team right now, and I'm sure it's a lot of fun in Baltimore right now.
And the last game from last night was the Padres knocking off the Dodgers 3-2. They've won the first 2 of that series, both in walk-off fashion. Yesterday was a walk-off walk drawn by Yangervis Solarte. The previous night was a game-ending home run off the bat of Melvin Upton. Dodgers have now dropped 4 in a row. The story for them is they win when Kershaw pitches, and they're not winning a whole lot when any of the other guys pitch. And they didn't win yesterday as they fall 3-2 in 11 innings. San Diego, as we know, doesn't hit a lot, but really the story is this Dodger team, outside of Kershaw, starting staff has just not been great.
Well, I tell you how much of an impact, really, Zach Greinke made for the Dodgers being the number 2 guy behind Kershaw, and really for himself, because being the guy in Arizona, he's picked it up a little bit, but he's not the guy he was last season. But yes, Kershaw, we know how good he is, but after him, everyone looked at this team and said they have so much pitching depth, but they've also had so many guys hurt. It's like, who's pitching for this team right now?
You got Kershaw and Kenta Maeda and Alex Wood and Ross Stripling and Kazmir. That's their 5. So let's run through the matchups for today, and then we'll give tomorrow's matchups as well, and then that'll just about close it out. We got action underway right now. Brewers and the Mets. Syndergaard on the mound for the Mets as they look for the sweep. Chase Anderson, who comes off a great start against the Cubs his last time. He went 8 2/3, carried a no-hitter actually into the 7th inning of that game, so that's who the Mets get tonight. They're scoreless top of the first. Mariners and Reds are underway there with Wade Miley on the mound against Alfredo Simon. I don't know why Alfredo Simon still gets run out there with his 10.13 ERA, but that's about the situation the Reds are in right now. Rays and the Tigers, rubber game there. Good pitching matchup. Archer's pitched better for the Rays. Jordan Zimmerman's been by far the best pitcher for the Tigers. Nationals and the Marlins underway in the first inning. Rubber game there as well. Adam Conley for the Marlins, and the Nationals pitcher is Scherzer. Rockies and the Pirates just about set to get underway. Chad Bettis against Juan Nicasio. Braves and the Phillies. How about Casey Kelly getting his first start for Atlanta? A guy who was a former first-round pick. He went in the Adrian Gonzalez trade from Boston to San Diego. Isn't that right?
I believe so, yes.
And Jared Eichhoff for the Phillies. Danny Salazar, Rick Porcello for the Indians and the Red Sox today at Fenway Park. Your Royals, John Giordano Ventura against Carlos Rodon as the Royals look for a sweep. Good matchup in Houston, although the Astros need Dallas Keuchel to start pitching better. 2-5 with a 5.43 is just not going to get the job done. Cole Hamels on the mound for the Rangers, so 2 lefties there. Blue Jays with Stroman taking on the Twins and Phil Hughes. Arizona has Greinke. The signs have been pointing in the right direction for Greinke after what was a disastrous start for him, but he's been doing a little better of late. Has the ERA down to 5.08, which it was around 10, so he's doing better now. Jaime Garcia has probably been the most consistent Cardinals pitcher so far this year. Gets the ball for St. Louis. Ubaldo Jimenez, Jared Weaver as the matchup. Baltimore at the Angels. Yankees have Pineda on the mound, and he's been the weak link in that rotation. 1-5, 6.60 ERA, matched up against Jesse Hahn. 4:05 first pitch in Oakland. Dodgers and the Padres. Kenta Maeda against Colin Ray, and then Sunday Night Baseball, the big matchup with Kyle Hendricks and Madison Bumgarner. So that's your Sunday slate for baseball this afternoon.
For Monday, looking into the new week, we start off with a doubleheader between the Indians and the White Sox. First place implications likely on the line there in the AL Central. First game, Steve Clevenger against Eric Johnson. In that first game, followed by Chase Anderson and Matt Latos. And 7:05, all times Eastern here. The Mets and the Nationals, first game of a big series there in D.C. Bartolo Colon for the Mets against Gio Gonzalez for the Nationals. Also 7:10, the Phillies taking on the Tigers. Vincent Velasquez against Mike Pelfrey for Detroit. Tampa Bay and Miami at 7:10. Matt Moore going up against Wei Chen. 8:05, the Angels taking on the Rangers. Nick Tropiano against Derek Holland. 8:10, Kansas City and Minnesota. Ian Kennedy against Ricky Nolasco. 8:15, the Cubs taking on the Cardinals, the first game of that series. John Lackey against Adam Wainwright. Always a big series, Cubs and Cardinals. And 10:10, Reds taking on the Dodgers. Brandon Finnegan going up against Clayton Kershaw. The A's taking on the Mariners. Rich Hill has been excellent for Oakland so far this year. It's 6 1/3 to 2.54 ERA, going up against Taijuan Walker. And the last game, San Diego taking on San Francisco. Drew Pomeranz going up against Johnny Cueto. So that's going to do it for the first Bases Juiced podcast. Thank you all very much for listening. Brian, thanks for coming on the show today.
All right, it was a lot of fun.
Go ahead and follow us on Twitter at number one Johnny Baseball. And Brian, go ahead.
And at Brian Goudsword. It doesn't get much more simple.
That's about it. So thanks again for listening, everybody. Really appreciate it. The plan is to be doing this once a week for the time being. So definitely keep checking back here for more episodes of Bases Juice. So thank you for listening, everybody, and enjoy the games.